Okay, this is where it all starts. We have our skeleton. This is one of those pose and stay skeletons I purchased from Costco years ago. It's been weathered with just spray paint where you spray the spray paint on, wipe it off with paper towels or whatever. That's how this guy has been aged. I've decided to kind of get a little more creative with this skeleton, and I've already removed there's some screws on the back end of these skeletons that are just above the shoulder. So there's one here and one here. Let me just go ahead and take this off so you can see what I'm talking about. But there are two screws that hold this rib cage together. So one here, both on both sides of the shoulders. And then the rib cages are just kind of held together with these pins. So one side has pins, and then these sides here have holes, and that's how everything just connects. So once you've gotten those screws out, you can have access to the inside of the rib cage, and you'll see why I've done that here in just a moment. But then the arms, you can see how they're only held in by these ball joints, and they just kind of sit like this. But the reason why I'm showing you this is because I went ahead and put some LED lights in here, and I'll get this powered up here in just a second to show you. But there's four green 5mm LEDs that I wired. So I have one pointing down in the rib cage, one pointing up, and then one pointing into each one of the shoulders. Let me get this plugged in so we can see how that looks. Okay, so this has now been plugged in, so you can see those LEDs. As a matter of fact, let me just go ahead and kill the lights here real quick. Right, so now you can see the LEDs and how that'll help light up the rib cage. I have not gone over these LEDs yet with hot glue. When I do, that's gonna help diffuse it. It's just a little too bright, just like the LEDs right out of the packaging. So I'm just gonna go over them with a little bit of hot glue, and that'll help diffuse that light a little bit. But it helps give us some light inside our skeleton, which is nice. And I use this same application actually on these lantern holders that I have. But you can see when I zoom in there. So that's what we're going to do on this guy too. So now you know what I'm going to be doing here on the inside. I'm going to get this put back together, try to hide the wire as best as I can, and just kind of get him put back together. So here we can see the rib cage, the lights. I've covered them with just a coating of hot glue. And like I said, that's to help diffuse that light. And that being out of the way, I'm going to turn my attention to the inner side of this rib cage here, because before I get into corpsing this, anything I want to try and do to the inside, it's going to be a lot easier to do it before I go and attach this rib cage. So things that I had in mind are these right here, and this are just some fake intestines, if you will, and they're not really even like intestines. It's just some creepy cloth I got from the dollar store that I coated it with a little bit of liquid latex, the same latex that I'm going to use to corpse this with. And then I just kind of scrunched it all together as it was drying to kind of give it this shape. And then what I'm planning on doing is just taking this and then just gluing it in various spots on the inside around the spinal cord, just to help give it a little more nastiness for when it's finally all finished and corpsed. Plus, what this will help me do is, because I have a wire now, I want to try and be able to hide it. So I know from dealing with these skeletons, you can see here there are 1, 2, 3, 4 screws on each side in the same spots. Possibly one here as well. I think that also has to come off. But I think if I remember right, if you take out these 9 screws, this just pops completely off. That'll help me to run that wire down through the spine and out through the back. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so the back has been removed. Typically, it would be like this. But what I'm going to do is this spine is going to have to, or the spine is going to act as a channel for me to hide this cord through. So my plan is I'll run the cord down through here and get that in there. Before I go ahead and start that though, what I guess I'll go ahead and do, I'll go ahead and start heating up my glue gun so that way I can start attaching these little bits of guts, if you will, to the inside. So what I'll end up doing is I'll just put a little bit of glue over here, put a little glue over here, and just kind of, you know, stick this on like that. I'm not looking to have like his entire intestines there. I really don't like the looks of skeletons with all of their guts. To me, it just doesn't make sense. If it's that deteriorated, why does it have guts, you know? So for me, I like just a little bit here and there. I want it to look like there's just some stuff still left on them, you know? You know, I think I'm also going to add just a little bit of color to this. Now, this was originally spray painted with some sort of a brown that I had when I first tried to weather it. It's great. It helped kind of hide away that stock look, but I want to break up this color a little bit, so I'm going to add a little bit of this Naples yellow hue and then just a little bit of black here. And I'm just going to use a foam applicator like this. And I'm just going to dab it in various spots all around. Just again, try and break up that solid color that you see in the back there. Okay, one thing to know when you're doing this is that if you go with a dark color, say if you're going to light it like I am, if you're going to try and light your rib cage with the like I did here, the darker color you go with on the inside here, the less the light is going to stick out. Now, if I were to go over this with, say, lighter shades of brown and tans, it'll help the light glow and show up a lot more on the inside of the rib cage. I'm not terribly worried about how much light I get, but if it's something that you're trying to go for, if you want to try and do this, just keep that in mind, is that the lighter the color, the more reflection you'll get from your LED. But if you're not going for that look, then this will be fine. Like I said, you'll still be able to see the inside. It's just, like I said, painting this a lighter color will help make that LED reflect off of it more, and you'll see it light up a lot better. Okay, so our glue gun is ready. What we're going to do is we're just going to apply little bits here to the inside of the rib cage. Again, it's just going to help us stick this sort of material. But I'm going to just kind of leave that here. And that's all I think I'm probably going to attach for the inside. I think that'll be good enough for now. I think I'm also going to put some here in the pelvis. With that being attached, I got this other part here that's just kind of off to the side. I'll wait till I have everything connected, and maybe I'll have that go up the spine or have it connect with the other guts. But I'm just going to let this glue finish drying, cooling down, and then I'll start putting the skeleton back together. All right, with the glue finally dried, we're going to go ahead and start reassembling. I wanted to run the wires in here, but first I'm going to see exactly where the wires need to go before I start trying to run them. Yeah, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole here so I can run the wire in and down through the spine and then out through the back. So here's where my wire is going to enter through my spine. I think I'll do the exit on the opposite side, but I think I'm going to drill a hole over here. So in, out. Okay, get our head back attached. We'll see if we can actually attach that back to the spine. Grab our arms. Tuck our wire in there. Go ahead and connect our the top of our rib cage to the back of our rib cage up top. Stick that arm in there. All right. I'm just gonna clip all these back into them. So again, just putting the pins into the holes for the ribs. That's all you got to do to reattach. It's pretty easy. Okay. The other side here. Okay, now we've got him put back together for the most part, so we're going to flip it around. Now we've got our other screws here that we're going to go ahead and drive in to connect him. Okay. Going to pull some of this excess through. And whatever's left up there, I can hide. So while I was able to hide the wires in the spine, I didn't want to take the spine completely apart to hide it all the way through. I think instead what I'm just going to do for this is I'm just going to take some floral wire and I'm going to wrap it in a couple of spots here around the spine, and then the rest of it I'll just have it draping out, and then it'll get plugged in from down there. But what I like to do with my floral wire though is I do like to braid it. I just use a drill, put one end in the, I put like a screw in here, and put the other end here inside a drill and just tighten it. But I'm just gonna take this floral wire and I'm just gonna wrap it around here. I'll put another one down here. And this, I'm not worried about this being exposed because number one, it's in the back. And number two, I'm going to be corpsing over this. So a lot of this will not be seen. But at least it'll keep my wire where it needs to be. Okay. And then the rest of this will just kind of hang out here through the back. So here's our skeleton all ready to go. I'm going to kill the lights here so you can see how it's going to look all lit up. So it's subtle. It's going to be even more subtle once I corpse over it, but it's going to be enough to help it light up at night. An idea that I'm contemplating about doing is putting some glowing eyes into the sockets. I've never actually done that one before, so I might give that a go for this. But that's where we're at right now. I'll make up my mind on the eyes, and then from there we'll start corpsing. All right, well, we're gonna go for it. So we're gonna try putting eyeballs in this with lights, green LEDs behind them. So this is the skull. I removed it. In case you've never removed it, you just have to be very careful, but you just slowly just kind of pry it off. Just so you can see. It's going to take a little bit of effort and pushing on it, but you just kind of push and twist, and then it's back on. To remove it, you want to hold this still on the neck, or you will rip the neck off. You can get it back in there if you do rip it off, but I'm not gonna lie, that's also a pain. But it just kind of gently pry it off like that. Okay, so that will be the holes that will feed our LED wires through. Let's see how they sit. They sit pretty darn well. Okay. So next step is going to be getting wires attached to these and then running those wires through the skull and out through here. We got the first LED in. We'll get the second one in next. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue to help keep these LEDs from getting sucked into the skull while I'm trying to wire this up. I just want to hold them steady there. Okay, everything is test fitted to be tried out here. So we've got everything wired up. And we're going to see how it works. Okay, so good, it works. Let's see. Let's grab our eyeballs. Let's grab this one to start with. So, looks pretty good. See if I can get it with the lights off so you can see how it will look. So yeah. It's pretty bright, but we're going to run with it. So I've got the electric that I'll have to just solder together, and then I'll have to connect that into the main wire that's lighting up the rib cage. But now we've got eyes. All right, so our skeleton now is all reassembled. I've got the head plugged in with the rest of the power that I have going through the rest of the rib cage that's lighting up the LEDs. I've got my intestines attached to the front part of the spine here just to kind of help cover things up. But it is ready to go for corpsing. The way that I like to corpse, I don't like to use the plastic wrap and heat gun method. I prefer instead to use pantyhose. I know that sounds a little strange, but I really like the way that this works, especially for putting a base onto a skeleton, or if you're just looking for a minimal look. I got these off of Amazon. Now, this is the queen size, and these are the high or sheer top, or the ones that go all the way to the waist is the ones you're looking for. You can use any color you want. You can use any size you want. I find the queen size works best to get it over the skeletons and not feel like it's too tight and gives me enough room to play with, you know, when I go to corpse it and shred this. But you don't have to use even all the same colors. You can use different colored pantyhose, as I'm going to end up doing on this one, because once we go over this with latex, you're not going to even really notice the color that much. And then once we paint it, you're really not going to notice it. So use whatever color you want, but if you're not going to be going over this with a lot of latex, just know that that color is going to end up shining through. I start the whole process out by stretching the pantyhose over the skeleton. I use hot glue in areas where I don't want the pantyhose to move from. So for example, I want my joints on all of the skeleton to be bendable. So I'm going to be putting hot glue at the tops and bottoms of the bones on the arms and like at the tops of the hips and by the knees. So that way, when I go to cut and shred the pantyhose, it will end up, you know, having flexibility in it, and I won't have pantyhose like just all of a sudden slingshot up and, you know, now it's not covering the leg at all or anything like that. I use hot glue to hold it down all over the place. So like on the head there, you saw that I just kind of pulled it over, and I'm just hot gluing it in various spots and pulling the pantyhose and stretching it. Another reason why I like working with this material is because you can put it exactly where you want it and you can play around with it, and it's very easy to work with. Now, once I've gotten all of the pantyhose glued down to where I want it to, I'm going to start shredding it. And the tools that I like to use for shredding the pantyhose are just a razor blade, box cutters, a pair of scissors, those are my weapons of choice. And you can see as I go through here, it doesn't take a lot to really make it really look creepy and shredded and decrepit. So it's one of my favorite things to do is corpsing, and this is why. Okay, so we've got our skeleton, our pantyhose on our skeleton, and we've got it all shredded. Just kind of letting you get another look here at it. I botched up this eye when I was cutting it. This one's not terrible. It's better. But I kind of goofed this one up, but I know that I can fix that with additional corpsing material. I didn't want to have the opening be that big. I want it to almost seem like there were still eyelids around it, but I can fix that with, like I said, when I go to corpse. But you'll notice that around pretty much, so I got to cut this, but pretty much around every one of the joints, excluding this one that I use as an example, I've cut away the pantyhose, at least enough to where it can still move and it won't be stuck once I put the pantyhose or once I put the latex on. This one being the exception, I'm leaving this one covered because I want that wire to be hidden. But everywhere else, I've gone ahead and cut away, so we should have full mobility. Now, with this being done, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start applying the mask latex. And when I go to apply the mask latex, you're going to see me take the pantyhose. Once I put a layer of latex down, right, I'm going to put a layer across everything. And while it's still drying, latex loves to stick to latex. So as I'm going over this with latex, you're going to see me take stuff and stretch it to move it to where I want it to be, without having to use hot glue. So you will see me doing a lot of that when I get to the next part where I'm putting on the latex. But it's coming along. So the latex that I use is RD 407 mask latex, and you can get this on Amazon. And what I just do is I just use a chip brush and I apply 2 thin coats to the entire skeleton and let that dry. So with 2 layers of latex now applied to the skeleton, both front and back, the next step is now going to be to start putting on these fake spider webs, okay? And this is something that you don't need a ton of in order to do this. I usually like to use scissors to cut the spider webs just because I don't need a lot for this particular step. So I'm just gonna go ahead and trim some here. All right, so here I have some spider webbing. This right here is a good section. I would probably use something like this for like the entire arm. But the, let's see, you know what, let me see if I can reposition the camera, get a better view of this. Okay, so I've zoomed in here on this one arm so you can get a better view of what I'm doing here with this, because I'm just gonna forewarn you, it's messy. This whole process has been kind of messy, but I feel like this is the messiest part, because the reason why I say that is what I do is I take my spider web and I start up at the top and I'm just trying to stretch it over the whole arm here, all the way down to the fingertips. Just gonna take that, wrap it around there. You want to do this now because next we're going to take it and we're going to apply liquid latex over this. And it does tend to pull and get a little, like I said, messy. But what I do is I take my spider webbing, I go all the way around it, just like that. And then again, using a chip brush, my mask latex, just going back and forth over the pantyhose again and the spider webs, and you'll see in a second here how that's going to look. But all right, so I'll just start here. and this stuff is going to get stuck in your chip brush, so it's going to get a little, like I said, it kind of gets everywhere. I feel like, but I've been trying to get better at using this. This is something I just started using. I saw this on a Facebook group. Someone had used spider webs on their corpse, and I thought it was a really neat little touch. So I figured I'm going to try this out on mine. And it's a pull, you know, you're pulling and pushing, you know, the spider webs around, and it's just kind of helping. And you can also pick it up and stretch it out if you want to try and get it to lay in certain spots. I've done that many a times, but just know that when you get it on your hands, it's just, like I said, it just gets a little bit messier. If you're not worried about it, don't worry. But this is what the technique looks like. And then again, we're going to do this across the entire skeleton, front and back, insides. Let's see, I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to move this guy down. Okay. You do not have to do the front and back. You could do just one side if you wanted to. It's entirely how much you want to put on or how little you want to put on. Okay, so I'm going to continue this exact same process across the rest of the skeleton, even up here on the head, and I'll come back after we're all done with that. Best advice I can give for this step is go thin with the spider webs. Don't put them on real thick. The thinner they are, the more they stretch, the better it looks. The second biggest tip I can give for this step is be mindful of the areas that you want to have moved, because once you go over it with the spider webs and then the latex, it will not move. So there's our pantyhose with 2 coats of latex and our spider webs with another coat of latex on top of that. Brings us to where we're at right now. Some of you might be wondering, like, hey, how come you didn't do this area down here? I liked a little bit of variety. I like having more of it up here. I feel like when the lights are on, the guts and everything are going to be what the main focus is. So if this is dark, I'm not really worried about the detail there. But when I go to put on the next step, I'll make sure I put some of that over this, just so that way it helps blend it so it's not so drastic between the rest of the skeleton. But I do like to have some variety in my skeletons when it comes to corpsing. I don't like to try and do the exact same thing across the whole skeleton. I do like to break it up a little bit, like one leg here you see has more corpsing on it than this one, and that's just the way that it is, and that's how I like my skeletons. So you can do it however you want to do yours. We got the back here as well. Probably could have stretched this a little better into this midsection area here, but again, this next part that I'm going to do will help kind of just tie everything together. And that next step is going to include making skin. So what I do to make skin is I take my mask latex and I brush it on relatively thick. It's not going to be thin, but I wouldn't say I'm globbing it on either. But I'm going to be generously applying liquid latex to all these squares that you see here. And I'm going to let that dry. And then when I come back, we're going to take that dried latex and we're going to make it look like even more rotted flesh. And we're going to add that onto our skeleton. And at that point, we can apply a little bit more latex over everything once we've got everything the way we want it. And that kind of holds everything in place, and it'll give it a nice last coating to kind of help it stand up a little bit better against the elements. I will say that this stuff, as good as it is, once you put it outside, once the sun beats on it, once the cold, the rain, it's gonna take its toll. So it's easy to touch it up if you want to, if you ever have one that's starting to really look like it's deteriorating on you. I've got a couple of skeletons that I need to redo that are pretty beat up, but it's very easy to redo them or bring them back to life using the same sort of technique that I'm doing here and using the masked latex. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Not something you really need to see. Maybe I'll show you just how liberal I'm applying it, but it's all we're going to do is just apply it to all these squares and let that dry. You want to make sure you have separation in between your sections of latex, or you'll end up with a giant sheet, which will basically be very, very difficult to work with. So that's why I have these lines of masking tape to help separate my latex. All right, so we've gone ahead and I've let the skeleton dry now. A lot longer than I wanted to. It's been about a week since I've been able to work on it. Usually I try to knock these kind of projects out with the weekend. Only reason why I'm telling you this is because sometimes, depending on your workshop, if you got a lot of dust, that can settle on the latex, and this next step could be a little tricky for you to apply if your latex is too dry. If your latex has been sitting out for a while and it's doesn't feel kind of tacky like at all, you might want to put a thin layer of latex on, just so that way it'll help this next step stick a little bit better to it. Because as I mentioned, latex loves to stick to latex, and this next step that we're going to be doing is going to be, well, here, let me just show you. So this is the board that I painted the latex on, and I've already dragged some stuff across it. You can see there's some spots here where the latex is torn, but the whole point of what we're going to use this for is to make fake skin to apply to the skeleton. Now, I laid it out in latex across all these squares, and now all I'm going to do is just use my finger to kind of drag on the latex, and you see how I'm making that hole there? Well, I'm going to make a bunch more. And this is just the latex peeling and sticking to itself, but you see you can get these really neat little, let me move this off of here. You can get these really neat designs, almost look like little wormholes, just more rotted, deteriorated flesh by doing this. And this is something that I like to apply as like a final layer, and just kind of helps give the corpse just a little more gruesome look. You can use other tools for this, because I will say after doing this for a while you will get like blisters or almost feel like rug burns on your fingers. So I've used things like the back of a screwdriver, but honestly my fingers are kind of so used to doing this now that they've kind of built up calluses. But just to let you know, in case you've never worked with this before. Now you can see this, the latex wants, like a rubber band, it wants to just kind of pull itself together. We don't want that to happen, because if that does, this is going to be just a big tangled up mess. But I'm going to continue to keep working this, and then I'm going to go around the edges here. See, I got to be careful here because I don't want to lose this, so I might have to hold this with my finger. Because just like the latex was sticking to itself, here when I go and kind of rub it onto itself, it sticks. Same thing is going to happen if this thing just kind of like slingshots together. It's all going to stick together, so you really want to be careful. It's almost better to have two people with you helping you with this step. But yeah, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel this off, and using my fingers, we've got a piece like this. Now what I'm going to try and do without ruining this is turn this so we can face our skeleton. Now we take our piece like this, and we're just going to lay it over the top. And because it's latex, and if this was fresher latex, this would stick a lot more, but because this has been sitting around for a week, it doesn't feel like it's sticking as well. But I'm still going to go over this, even though I'm attaching it like this. This will be holding good enough. I'm going to go over this again with latex at the very, very end, because I can also see there's some spots where I had the cobwebbing. Like here, I had the cobwebbing where I didn't get enough latex on it. In certain spots here, I can also see a lot of cobwebbing that could use a little more latex. So I'll go over this one last time. Another spot over here. But this is how it's going to get applied. So I'm going to repeat the process that you just saw here. There's where I took the spot, that little piece off of. But I've got this whole board here to do, and I'm gonna just do a quick time lapse. Whatever you're going to use to mark up your latex and make your holes, just make sure it's not something that's sharp, because if it starts scratching up your board and you go to put latex on it, the latex will settle into those scratches. So this is an example of a section where I put the latex on a little too thin. You can see as I'm rolling it, it's not building up very much. It's very, very tiny there, whereas over here you can see I put it on thicker, and as it's rolling it's much thicker. This is more around the lines of what you're looking for when you're doing this. If you're going to roll it and it's just almost like shredding as you're going, that's on the verge of being just a little too thin, I think. So I'm still going to use it. Like I said, none of this stuff really ever goes to waste, especially when I'm putting it on the corpses. Even if I screw it up and the whole thing scrunches together, it becomes guts, and I'll find a spot for it. So you won't waste anything. But if you're looking to, really nail this craft, just something I would point out is that if you go too thin, it's going to just basically tear. This one here might be salvageable, but it's right on the verge of being too thin, in my opinion. So just giving you some tips, I guess. So one thing I'm going to try, because this is something I've never really done before, is putting glowing eyes inside of my skeleton. What I'm going to do to try and help keep the eyes glowing only where I want to see the glow, I've got this black paint, and I'm going over the latex here and over the pantyhose to try and help not have that bleed through so much. Because even if I go over this with latex, it's still gonna probably show through. So the best thing I can do that I can think of is to try and use black paint to darken out the spots I don't want really showing. And then this way, when I go over it with the last bit of latex, that'll help cover up the paint, and I'll have just the part of the eye glowing that I really, really want. Okay, so I am now going to go turn off the lights and see what kind of a difference that actually made. Noticeable difference, but I can still see that I have areas that I need to try and paint. So I'm going to just try and hit all that. So that way, like I said, when I go over it with the latex, it won't be as noticeable. With those drying, I'm going to get ready to put on the next layer of latex, which is just going to be lightly around these eyes just to kind of cover up that black paint. So after I finish putting this latex on around the eyes, I'm going to give the entire skeleton a coat of the liquid latex. This is just going to help hold everything down, but it's also going to help for the next part that I'm going to be doing, where I'm going to be attaching additional pieces to that wet latex. Another reason why I like using mask latex, or this RD407 mask latex, is as I work my way through, you can see that some latex is dry to the sides of the bucket. I use every bit of this stuff, and this is great for at the very end when you want to add on maybe some fleshier bits, because since it was stuck to the side of the bucket, one side of it is smooth and the other side is all textured from just, wiping latex off. So when you apply this, you can either have a smoother spot for something that wants to look like skin, or you could put it like what I'm doing here to have it more like of a rotted flesh look. It's just a lot of fun to use and mess with, and it gives you just a little added details to really help make your corpse just kind of pop and give it that gross factor. And just another reason why I love using this mask latex for my corpsing, and why I like corpsing in this way. And because of that last layer of latex that I applied, this is going to stick to it very, very well, but you could also go over it with another layer if you wanted. So the way that I go about putting hair on my skeletons is I wait for the latex to dry, and then I apply a very light layer where I want to lay the hair down. Now, the hair that I use is just costume hair that I cut off of a wig, and I just separate some strands as best as I can, and then I lay them onto the wet latex, and then I take my brush and I just brush over the strands I lay down while I'm holding the hair, so I don't want it to pull with the brush, because a lot of times that will happen. And I just keep repeating that process until I've got enough hair on there that I want. I usually go very sparingly with it, but it works well, and it seems to hold up over time. From the few skeletons that I've applied hair to, it still seems to stick. Something about putting the latex onto the latex when you're brushing it over the hair just helps it really bond to it and doesn't pull out. But yeah, this is a great technique that I've used for putting hair on my skeletons. And after I've got everything that I want on there, I just hit it with the blow dryer, not till it's fully dry, but just to kind of get that latex to set. And then I just continue working on to the rest of the skull. This is typically, though, the last step when it comes to corpsing. You're absolutely able to put more of any of the materials that we've already done. If you wanted to try and add additional props to it, you absolutely could. But this is usually where I'm done and I'm getting ready for paint. Now, as far as the paint that I use, I like to use wood stains. Minwax wood stains are the ones that I typically use, and the color Early American is what I used for this corpse. And then I also used some Jacobean, which you'll see me a little bit later on, to apply some darker spots. But when I'm applying the stain, I just put it on and then I quickly dab it off with a towel. I can always add more stain later on and let it sit longer to get a darker color. If you go too dark, you can always add stain to it to let it lighten up that color as well. But this is Early American. I really like the way it looked on this corpse. And then I go now with some Jacobean to just kind of help make some darker areas and just kind of help give it a little more detail. But that's it. This is how I corpse, and I hope you all found this helpful. And thank you all for watching.